So, hey everyone, today I have something new for you. So, instead of doing Gandhi Panikar and sorry, my hair is just. Instead of doing Gandhi Panikar or Tagore, I have decided to do a different text, and this is 1984. This is by George Orwell, and it is frighteningly similar to, although it describes a dystopian world, it is frighteningly similar to our realities today. And I've been reading this book for a while. I've had it for a very long time, but I only just got to reading it. And I decided that I think it's really important for all of us who have not read it or who have already read it to reread it, to contextualize it, and pass on the message of, you know, what's really going on in our realities. And so I'm gonna help you do that to the best of my abilities. Please be patient with me. I have not yet covered fiction, and so I'm gonna have to give way more context for this than I have had to with Tagore, Gandhi, and Panikar. Yeah, also look at the new art on my wall. I decided to make my private space a little less gloomy. I was saving this for some special occasion, and then I realized I think lockdown is a special enough occasion. I don't know what the fuck am I waiting for to make myself happier than I am or to cheer myself up in general. So, anyway, all of that is for later for my vlogs. This is my lecture series. So, okay, I'm just going to give you a little bit of context in this book. So, it is talking about a dystopian post revolutionary world. It is believed that historically, so I've not gone through the whole book, so I don't know what the truth is. So, please don't give me away. From whatever little I know, I've read till chapter 7. So, from what I know so far, it is believed that they live in a post revolutionary world, and the capitalists were overthrown by the revolutionaries, and one of them was Big Brother, and he promised a fair and just society, only to become a capitalist, fascist, horrible human being instead. And nobody knows who he is. They all just know that he's watching. Okay. And so there are many ministries under the party, which is that's what it's called. That's all it's called, the party. And one of the ministry is called the Ministry of Truth, and it has three diktats. First is war is peace, second is freedom is slavery, and third is ignorance is strength. So these three will help you understand the sort of the ideology, the propaganda that Big Brother abides by, and that he wants to spread to his subjects. And I also wanted to start with these three slogans because I wanted to discuss the role of language in not only in establishing but sustaining a totalitarian society. So this language is called doublethink, and he explains doublethink on page 38, and I'll just read out that excerpt for you. So this is Winston. Winston is the main character. He works with the ministry, and he secretly loathes the party, and he secretly hates the work that he does, but he doesn't really feel like he has a choice, and so he keeps going on, but he is penning down his seditious thoughts, his anti-national thoughts, and so he helps us deconstruct doublethink. So this excerpt goes something like this. Winston sank his arms to his sides and slowly refilled his lungs with air. His mind slid away into the labyrinth world of doublethink. To know and not to know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies, to hold simultaneously two opinions which cancelled out, knowing them to be contradictory and yet believing in them both, to use logic against logic, to repudiate morality while laying claim to it, to believe that democracy was impossible, but also that the party was the guardian of democracy, to forget whatever it was necessary to forget, but then to draw it back into memory again at the moment it was needed, and then promptly to forget it again, and above all, to apply the same process to the process itself. That was the ultimate subtlety, to consciously induce unconsciousness, and then once again to become unconscious to the act of hypnosis you just performed. Even to understand the word doublethink involved the use of doublethink. And so there's an example on page 74. Yes. The party claimed, of course, to have liberated the proles from bondage. So the proles are the proletariats, essentially. So he's talking about how the party claims to have done great deeds and to have, once when they overthrew the capitalists, how they were better, how they have built a better, more fair society. And so he's explaining how the party has used doublethink to forge false memories in the minds of the masses. So the party claimed, of course, to have liberated the proles from bondage. Before the revolution, they had been hideously oppressed by the capitalists. They had been starved and flogged. Women had been forced to work in coal mines. Women still did work in coal mines, as a matter of fact. Children had been sold in factories at the age of 6. But simultaneously, true to the principles of doublethink, the party taught that the proles were natural inferiors who must be kept in subjection like animals by the application of a few simple rules. In reality, very little was known about the proles. It was not necessary to know much. So he's talking about how not only to convince us that they have they're doing a lot of good for the nation, they make the masses believe that those who had been oppressed are doing much better today, and yet at the same time they are inducing this prejudice against those same people by keeping them inferior, by keeping them poor, by keeping them, at the margins of the society. And how, despite the fact that very evidently they are, closing them back into the same space that the party claims to have liberated them from, the masses seem to be eating up their bullshit. So the thing you invariably come back to was the impossibility of knowing was what life was before the revolution. So Winston takes out of the drawer a copy of a children's history textbook which he'd borrowed from Mrs. Parsons, and began copying a passage into the diary. So this is the diary in which he's writing his seditious thoughts. So throughout the book, he tries to keep it away from the telescreen, and the telescreen is installed in every household through which the big brother is watching you. So he makes sure that you don't have any thoughts except for the ones that they want you to think, that you are total dumb idiots, totally unconscious, totally susceptible and subjectable to the propaganda that they want you to, that they're trying to, induce into the society to make us all into compliant servants. So in the old days, so he's writing from the history book. In the old days, before the glorious revolution, London was not a beautiful city that we know today. It was a dark, dirty, miserable place where hardly anybody had enough to eat, and where hundreds and thousands of poor people had no boots on their feet and not even a roof to sleep under. Children no older than you had to work 12 hours a day for cruel masters who flogged them with whips if they worked too slowly and fed them on nothing but stale bread crusts and water. But in among all this terrible poverty, there were just a great big beautiful houses that were lived in by the rich men who had as many as 30 servants to look after them. These rich men were called capitalists. They were fat, ugly men with wicked faces like the one in the picture on the opposite page. You can see that he's dressed in a long black coat, which was called a frock coat, and a queer shiny hat shaped like a stovepipe, which was called a top hat. That was the uniform of the capitalists, and no one else was allowed to wear it. The capitalists owned everything in all the houses, all the factories, and all the money. If anybody disobeyed them, they would throw them into prison, or they would take his job away or starve them to death. When any ordinary person spoke to the capitalist, he had to cringe and to bow down to him, and to take off his cap and address him as sir. Doesn't this sound like the state of untouchables in India? Think about it. The chief of all capitalists was called the king, but then Winston knows the rest of the catalogue. There would be mention of bishops in their long sleeves, the judges in their how could you tell how much of it was lies? So his point is that he's reading from a history textbook, which is nothing more than a story fabricated by the party to make you eat up the bullshit that they want you to eat. So that's why he's saying, how could you tell how much of it was lies? It might be true that the average human being was better off now than he had been before the revolution. But the only evidence to the contrary was the mute protest in your own bones, the instinctive feeling that the conditions you lived in were intolerable and that at some other time they must have been different. So essentially he's saying that we don't know what the truth is except the feeling that we feel when we live the lives that we live today. I don't know what life was before the revolution, but I know what life is today, and it's not very good. It struck him that the truly characteristic thing about modern life today was not its cruelty and its insecurity, but simply its bareness, its dinginess, its listlessness. Life, if you looked about you, bore no resemblance not only to the lies streamed out of the telescreens, but even to the ideals that the party was trying to achieve. Great areas of it for a party member were neutral and non-political, a matter of slogging through dreary jobs, fighting for a place on the tube, darning a worn-out sock, cadging a saccharin tablet, saving a cigarette end. Ideal set up by the party was something huge, terrible and glittering, a world of steel and concrete, of monstrous machines and terrifying weapons, a nation of warriors and fanatics, marching perfectly forward in perfect unity, all thinking the same thoughts and shouting the same slogans, perpetually working, fighting, triumphing, persecuting, 300 million people, all with the same face. The reality was decaying, dingy cities where underfed people were shuffled to and fro in leaky shoes, in patched up 19th century houses that smelled always of cabbage and bad lavatories. He seemed to see a vision of London, vast and ruinous, city of a million dustbins, and mixed up with it was a picture of Mrs. Parsons, who was his neighbor, a woman with lined face and a wispy hair, fiddling helplessly with a blocked waste pipe. So he's essentially painting you a picture of London today, London ruled by the Big Brother party, and he's trying to contrast it with the London that used to be before the revolution, and he's trying to essentially tell you, is there any difference? What really happened during the revolution? Was there really a revolution? Have we really progressed? So he's essentially saying, he's also, by the way, critiquing modernity here. He's essentially saying that this whole idea of progress in modernity is actually complete bullshit, because the idea of modern life was not just its cruelty and its insecurity, but just how bare and dingy and listless it was. So he's giving you the bitter truth about industries. He's telling you the bitter truth of the proletariats. He's telling you the bitter truth of capitalism, and how in the name of revolution, or under the guise of revolution, nothing really has changed and we haven't really progressed, which is one of the dictats of modernity, that we're exactly where we were, except the difference is that people believe it to be better than it is, that people are fools now. Day and night, the telescreens bruised your ears with statistics proving that people today had more food, they had more clothes, they had better houses, they had better recreations, that they lived longer, worked shorter hours, were bigger, healthier, stronger, happier, more intelligent, better educated than the people of 50 years ago. Not a word could ever have been proved or disproved. The party claimed, for example, that today 40% of adult proletariats were literate. Before the revolution, it was said that the number had only been 15%. The party claimed that the infant mortality rate was now only 160 per thousand, whereas before the revolution it had been 300, and so it went on. It was like a single equation with two unknowns. It might very well be that literally every word in the history books, even the things that one accepted without question, was pure fantasy. For all he knew, there might never have been such a law as the prima noctis, or any such creature as a capitalist, or any such garment as a top hat. So he's trying to tell you just the utter absurdity of it all, that there is no way of knowing what the truth is except what you feel, and what you feel there is no word for it and nobody will believe you. because there's too many words, too many double speak, too much double think. And those who have the ability to instinctively sense and intuitively feel, they're called brutish, essentially the proletariats. They're the people who do possess the truth. They are totally demonized by the big brother and his party, and they're totally delegitimized. And also those who were part of the revolution, it wasn't just big brother, he had other allies, but they claimed to have participated in counter-revolutionary activities, and so they were kicked out and made out to be public enemies. I mean, think about it as what Kejriwal did with Yogendra Yadav and Prashant Bhushan. They were kicked out for anti-party activities, and then look at what Kejriwal is today. We all thought that he would be a response, a fuck you to the BJP, and actually they're a fuck you to us, all of us who voted for him, who hoped that, who put our faiths in him. So do you see, it's insane how fucking relevant this shit is. He picked up the children's history book and looked at it. Oh, sorry. Before that, the past had not only changed, but changed continuously. But what it afflicted him most was this sense of nightmare. This thing that he never clearly understood why this huge imposture was undertaken. The immediate advantages of falsifying the past were obvious, but the ultimate motive was mysterious. He took up his pen and he wrote, "I understand how. I do not understand why." He picked up the children's history book and looked at the portrait of Big Brother, which formed its frontispiece. The hypnotic eyes gazed into his own. It was as though some huge force were pressing upon you, something that penetrated inside your skull, battering against your brain, frightening you out of your beliefs, persuading you almost to deny the evidence of your own fucking senses. In the end, the party would announce that 2 and 2 made 5, and you would have to believe it. It was inevitable that they should make that claim sooner or later. The logic of their position demanded it. Not merely the validity of experience, but the very existence of an external reality was tacitly denied by their philosophy. The heresy of heresies was common sense. And what was terrifying was not that they would kill you for thinking otherwise, but that they might be right. For all we know, how do we know that 2 and 2 makes 4, or that the force of gravity works, or that the past is unimaginable, if both the past and the external world exist only in the mind, and if the mind itself is controllable? What then? I mean, think of it like the kind of things that people do, the kind of torture that is inflicted upon the mind, where its most fundamental beliefs are destroyed. Actually, if any of you have read The Hunger Games, you would know that this is what is done to Peeta. And so they doctor his memories, and he becomes a clone of I forgot what they were called, essentially those who represent powers like the Big Brother, and he's made to hate Katniss. And the first time that he's kept in captivity by them, and once he's released, because Katniss and her team, the revolutionaries, they succeed in releasing him and capturing him again, and then he tries to kill her, the woman that he claimed to love, and she doesn't understand it until she understands that he's been totally compromised, because his very memories have been not just deleted, but they've recreated new memories. And this is exactly it. It's like making people not just doubt the truth, but to make them question whether there is a truth, whether anything they've ever believed is true, and then what is true. And then they live in this kind of void, and then that makes you think about what he said about modern life, about its listlessness, its bareness. And that's exactly what they want to make of the human mind and the human heart. So they become perfect slaves, they become the perfect vessels to not just infiltrate their propaganda with, but so they can pass this on. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. His heart sank as he thought of the enormous power arrayed against him, the ease which any party intellectual would overthrow him in debate, the subtle arguments which he would never be able to understand, much less answer. And yet he was in the right, and he knew it. They were wrong, and he was right. The obvious, the silly, and the true has got to be defended. Truisms are true. Hold on to that. The solid world, it exists. Its laws do not change. Stones are hard, water is wet, objects unsupported fall towards the center, the earth's center. So he's essentially arguing for scientific objectivism. The universal truths: the sun rises in the east, sets in the west, gravity exists, love exists. With the feeling that he was speaking to O'Brien, and also that he was setting forth an important axiom, he wrote, "Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 plus 2 makes 4. If that is granted, all else follows." It's so moving and it's so gripping, because they are being reduced to such a primitive state, where for them to be able to assert that mathematical scientific truths are true, that is the most revolutionary, that is the most rebellious act against the ministry, against Big Brother. Let me just repeat that. Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 plus 2 makes 4. If that is granted, all else follows. So I want to make this last part about the language of doublespeak. So I'll just get right into it. This is page 55. So this is this man called Simi, not sure how it's pronounced. So he is responsible for making this dictionary for Big Brother, and this dictionary contains all words of Newspeak, and it is the destruction of Old Speak or Standard English. So he says, "It's a beautiful thing, the destruction of words. Of course, the great wastage is in the words, is in the verbs and the adjectives, but there are hundreds of nouns that can be got rid of as well. It isn't only the synonyms, there are also the antonyms. After all, what justification is there for a word which is simply the opposite of some other word? A word contains its opposite in itself. Take good, for example. If you have a word like good, what is the need for there to be a word like bad? Ungood will do just as well. Better, because it's an exact opposite, which the other is not. Or again, if you want a stronger version of good, what sense is that is there in having a whole string of vague, useless words like excellent and splendid and all the rest of them? Plus good covers the meaning, or double plus good if you want something stronger still. Of course, we use these forms already, but in the final version of Newspeak, there will be nothing else. In the end, the whole nation of goodness and badness will be covered by only 6 words. In reality, only 1 word. Don't you see the beauty of that, Winston? It was Big Brother's original idea, of course. He added as an afterthought." Do you hear how terrifying it is? Like, do you see how Doublethink has completely captured this man's mind? How he's calling words like excellent and splendid vague and useless, and he believes that the opposite of good is not bad. It is not the exact opposite, but ungood is the exact opposite. How they're completely destroying they're destroying the very ability to think critically. I am just amazed. It's amazing. It's amazing in a terrifying way, but ungood will do just as well. Better, because it's an exact opposite, which the other is not. And he completely justifies that. Or if you want a stronger version of good, why do you need excellent? Plus good is fine. Or double plus good. Okay. Then he says, "Don't you see that the whole aim of Newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? In the end, we shall all make thought crime literally impossible, because there will be no words in which to express it. Every concept that can ever be needed will be expressed by exactly 1 word." And also think about the idea of what he said about goodness and badness being destroyed into and reduced to 2 words, but actually only just 1. That they're completely destroying total ideas. It's a total destruction of ideas, concepts, any kind of discourse, any kind of dialogue. Every concept that can ever be needed will be expressed by exactly 1 word, with its meaning rigidly defined and all its subsidiary meanings rubbed out and forgotten. Already in the 11th edition, we're not far from that point. But the process will still be continuing long after you and I are dead. Every year, fewer and fewer words in the range of consciousness always a little smaller. Even now, of course, there's no reason or excuse for committing thought crime. It's merely a question of self-discipline, reality control. But in the end, there won't be any need even for that. The revolution will be complete when the language is perfect. So for him, that's the idea of perfect. Perfect doesn't mean, doesn't imply beauty or goodness or joy. Perfect means closed, means limited, means small, means control, means some kind of rejection, denial, destruction. Are you hearing his implications? How doublethink is making him a double idiot, essentially. Uh, but in the end, Newspeak is Inksock and Inksock is Newspeak, he added with a sort of mystical satisfaction. Has it ever occurred to you, Winston, that by the year 2050, at the very latest, not a single human being alive would be able to understand such a conversation as we're having now? By 2050, earlier probably, all real knowledge of old speak will have disappeared. The whole literature of the past will have been destroyed. Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, Byron, they'll exist only in Newspeak versions, not merely changed into something different, but actually changed into something contradictory of what they say, what they used to be. Even the literature of the party will change, even the slogans will change. How could you have a slogan like freedom is slavery when the concept of freedom has been abolished? The whole climate of thought will be different. In fact, there will be no thought as we understand it now. Orthodoxy means not thinking, not needing to think. Orthodoxy is unconsciousness. So it's like they're destroying the opposition, literally, symbolically, figuratively, in every possible way. Any kind of opposition to the party, any kind of opposition to ideas themselves, any kind of like I said, just killing the other, and they otherize everything that they don't agree with, that they don't stand by, that lies outside the purview of the circumference of their propaganda, of the party's propaganda. And do you see how they are, it's being extrapolated in all spheres of the life of people living in 1984. I'm just amazed at the genius of the attempt of this mass annihilation of thought itself, because in this way you don't have to have any real targets, because you have completely destroyed the idea of the target. And that's essentially what he's saying, that there would be no slogans like freedom is slavery, because there is no freedom. I'm sorry for being repetitive, but it's so genius in the most terrifying way. I mean, to use that same concept for good. Just imagine intellectually the idea of what he's doing. It's just, I'm sorry, I sound like a fanatic. I'm probably looking insane to you, but it's just that as I was reading it, I was like, this is exactly what Hitler was trying to do. This is exactly what BJP is trying to do. And it also makes me think of the limitless possibilities of how we could use the same for so much good, and yet it's being used for such evil. And how, I'm sorry, like, I just need time to collect my thoughts. When I look at things that are so, when I read about things, when I see talent, when I see potential, and I see it being used for so much hate and destruction, I just go into this whole space of like, wow, I am amazed at your ability to be able to concoct such a strategic, such a nuanced, such a genius plan, but look at your intentions. Look at, just look at what you're doing with that, with the mind like that, with the with the kind of enthusiasm, with the kind of, it's like he's thought of everything except humanity itself. you know the idea of saying things like, we won't have slogans like freedom is slavery, because there would be no such thing as freedom. How about you use that for the opposite effect? How about you say the opposite? How about it's slavery that you attempt to abolish? And this is what puts me into this kind of existential despair, and this kind of space of what does it take for a human being to flip their humanity, and why is it that such great brilliant minds turn to such evil. And yeah, I think I'm gonna let this video end here, because I just want to let this sink in with all those who are watching, and also because I feel like when I read 1984, it fills me with so much. It's such a brilliant intellectual exercise to read 1984, but it's also so deeply, it makes me so deeply sad. Not just because of what it's propagating, what the Big Brother party is propagating, but because, like I said, the terrifying parallels to our realities today, and the role of revolutionaries who continue to dissent, and who don't let their brilliance get to their head and turn it against humanity itself, who don't forget to continue fighting for humanity. And yeah, I would just like you to think about what I have put forth in front of you, not just in terms of what I've read from 1984, but my own reactions to what I've read, and think about how it makes you feel, and reflect on it a little. And I would be happy to hear your thoughts on it as well, if it makes you feel the way it makes me feel. Because I think for me, I've always been very intellectually curious, but then when you see the lines of intellect crossing into just pure evil, that's when it becomes, like I said, that's when it becomes very difficult. That's when I start feeling very, it gets to me. I don't know if you can tell from this video, but it's really getting to me, and I'm really sorry that I'm taking such long pauses. It's just that I want to kind of like be real with you about how conflicted I feel when I read texts like 1984. Yeah, okay, this has been really long. Anyways, I'll see you next time.